The immediate issue is that Governor Jerry Brown wanted to appoint an openly gay judge, but the kind of tradition was if you were looking for someone in the black community, you would go to the Black Bar Association. If you were looking for a women's group, you would get an endorsement. And there was no LGBT Bar Association to do that endorsement.
And his willingness to do this, when he appointed Mary Morgan to the municipal court, she was the first lesbian ever appointed, as we said, in the universe, you know.
But at the time, it was unheard of. And you really, not many would dare to be out and run for a judgeship or get appointed.
And we just thought it was the most crazy thing to think, you know, it's felony to be practicing, you know, gay man or lesbian in 26 states or something like that at the time. And we're going to have an openly gay and lesbian judge.
When I became a judge in 1981, it was not so much what I did, but what I seemed to represent to many other people, which was the ability to be out and to be successful and well respected.
For those of us who are litigators, our cases are in most instances decided by judges, and judges are subject to their own biases, and those of us who go into the courtroom as openly gay, as openly queer people have, I think, an obstacle to overcome in many courtrooms across the state, across this country.
Prior to that time, we were in the corners, and all of a sudden we're behind the bench. That's extraordinary.
You know, we're in a licensed profession. It made it difficult. People were afraid. And even if you weren't afraid of losing your license, people were afraid of losing their positions or their security clearances or custody of their children. I mean, you have to understand when this was taking place. On the other hand, we had a very visible rights movement taking place. We had people, you know, we had the founding of the Lesbian Rights Project, the National Center for Lesbian Rights, gay rights advocates, Lambda, and all of these legal organizations. There was a large group of us who were out and proud and legally aggressive.
BALIF immediately became central in two movements, and one of them was to make sure that we had lesbian judges in the family courts, and the other was to be sure that we had an understanding of how lesbians could legally have their own children.
I think the greatest service that BALIF provided, first it was the Gay Legal Referral Service, and then the AIDS Legal Referral Service.
BALIF played an unbelievably pivotal role in the AIDS epidemic, including the ALRP. That was all BALIF lawyers.
There have been people living with HIV who have fought so hard to ensure that they get the care and the treatment and the prevention tools that are needed to address the epidemic. And it has been a great honor for me to work with all of those folks. I take inspiration from them every day.
There was a big fight to close the bathhouses as being unsafe and where there was unsafe sex going on. And in a very heated discussion involving a lot of law firms and lawyers, BALIF decided that somebody needed to speak up for the civil rights issue of freedom of association. And in the end, BALIF was the only organization in the gay community that actually opposed the ban.
And there was a big debate about the bathhouses then as well. That was thought to be somewhat divisive. But again, Mary Dunlap comes to mind. She certainly stood up and fought for the right of gay men to go to any bathhouse they wanted to. And it was important, I think, to have a female voice in that debate. There was a tension at the beginning, and it was completely resolved around the proposition that bailiff would support educational efforts. And we could all get behind that. And I was really proud of that because I felt I was worried that bailiff was going to break up over that issue, and it didn't. And I think the fact that it didn't created a precedent for whatever other difficult times bailiff board members may have had since then. If you get enough good women and enough good men in a room, you can find a point of agreement. And I'm sure that's just as true today as it was in the 1980s.
We were dispatching volunteer lawyers left and right to people's bedsides. It was very important that our legal organizations really take up the mantle. And so that's what we did until we could sort of take a deep breath and figure out that we needed to create a specialized entity that did nothing but that.
I was sitting next to Gary Woods and Steve Richter, and I said, I'm getting these calls. We need to start having a way to get lawyers who will do wills for people who are dying. Gary worked with Steve, and they immediately said, yes, let's do that. They set up a phone tree in their office where they got lawyers who would do wills, and they gave their number to the people at Ward 5B in San Francisco and to some of the other social work organizations. And it said, if somebody needs a lawyer to do a will, we'll get one for you. Within a couple of months, it was clear that this is becoming a big deal. And we created a bailiff committee. And this was the tipping point for bailiff because bailiff at that point had not done any direct service work. It very quickly became one of the major activities of bailiff. And within a couple of years, we had 30, 40, 50 lawyers on our panel. It was still all being done by volunteers. And most of the lawyers came from the bailiff roster.
I think it's important to remember that the connection between bailiff and the AIDS legal referral panel is very deep. Many of us got trained by bailiff and ALRP to do emergency wills for people who were dying very quickly. In the work that I do with ALRP, bailiff has been incredibly supportive. There is still a remarkable number of young gay attorneys who get involved with ALRP's work, and many of them, I think, get involved through their initial contacts with bailiff.